What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode number 45 of My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly, and before we jump into today's conversation with Scott Berty, there's a couple things that we need to go over first. Number one, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a rating and a review. The more positive ratings and reviews we get, the more that the podcast apps look positively upon this show, and the more it gets picked up in the algorithm to help new people find the show and to really grow the community that we're developing here. And if you're one of those people that have recently found this podcast, welcome. I'm very excited to have you here. Make sure you subscribe, stay tuned for future episodes. And to everybody listening, make sure you screenshot this, post it to your Instagram story, tag @MySocialPod, and I will feature you on the account and send you a message as well. Now, without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Scott Berty. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. Today I'm joined by Scott Berty, and Scott is the head of sales at Trufan, and he's also established a really solid brand on LinkedIn. And I'm really excited to have him here today to talk about why you should be using LinkedIn, other trends in the social media space. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate you having me on in the hometown of Ottawa for me, and I guess for you too, as I just found out.
Yeah. So I want to go back, because I want to go all the way back to high school when you were playing football.
Start off with the story.
Yeah, start off with that. And by my research, you guys won OFSA, which people know is like the equivalent of like winning provincials or state championship.
Yeah, I would say like I can't compare it to a state championship because I understand the caliber of football in the U.S. versus probably what we had here in Canada, and I actually understand it pretty well due to the fact that our quarterback throughout high school up until grade 12, when he actually went down to Florida, was kind of touted as that guy. And so he actually did go down to Florida initially during our grade 12 year and was playing there. But after, I think it was like one of their star receivers got hurt, they decided to move that offense more towards like an option offense where he'd be handing the ball off a lot more. So he wanted to come back and keep throwing the ball. Mm-hmm. So he actually moved back, took our starting quarterback spot after he had led us to an undefeated season at that point, and then came back and, was like whizzing the ball 40 miles an hour quicker than our other quarterback. To his credit, the other quarterback was great and like a star athlete himself, just one of those natural athletes. But the only reason we won OFSA was probably because of those guys and a few other guys on defense and offense. Definitely not because of me. I can't take credit for that one.
Is there any lessons that kind of stick with you today that you've kind of learned through playing sport growing up?
It's a great question. I'd say competitiveness. I don't know if that's as much a lesson as it is more of just like a trait or a personality trait, but that's definitely something that stuck with me for quite a long time. Like whether I was playing house league hockey, like I didn't play any bant or double A growing up for, I think it was the Barron series that they had before the junior grads, who you're probably somewhat aware of. But yeah, just because of the space that you playing with the 67, so like a junior team. But house league hockey, football, a little bit of basketball, never really like playing for a league growing up, but like playing against a lot of guys who played, and then like getting competitive when we were playing street ball. So like that competitiveness definitely drives me on the business side, and has definitely kind of been there as a personality trait throughout life. I think as like sports go, just understanding that you're not going to be the best oftentimes. Like I was surrounded by a lot of great athletes, and I think that being able to work off of them and just like understand how you can take little traits that each one of they have and try and build on your own skill set is something that's important. I think that applies a lot to just like life in general when you're networking, and maybe part of the reason why people should use LinkedIn nowadays, like you kind of touched on at the start, as that kind of being a trend and building a personal brand there, but just looking as to like what others are doing around you, trying to emulate like some of their really good traits and what makes them great, but also understanding that like, you're never going to be the best out there. So you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because then you'll never be able to leave the room. It's much like if you're the star player, like no one's going to ever want to let you leave. You're always going to be stuck there. So.
That's interesting. Like usually people take in that direction of like competitiveness that you started with, but I've never really heard anyone take in the direction of like never being the best person out there and always finding ways to improve. Yeah.
Like, I guess there's the mentality that embodies like, I think Draymond Green during the NBA Finals talked about like, if you don't believe you're the best as an athlete, more so maybe for that level especially, then you're doing yourself some kind of wrong. I don't see it that way, especially growing up, like when you're playing high school sports and there's a complete edge, like over like the people who are really good and those who are like I was a fun, okay athlete, and I was lucky to just be around those kinds of guys and like have some success. And certainly I knew a lot of like great hockey players growing up, as a lot of us do from Canada. And I knew I was never going to be as good as those guys. So like you kind of understand from early age, there's going to be a bit of a skill discrepancy there, but you can definitely find your place, you know what I mean, on that team, and still work and be part of that team's success. Just as much as a lot of those other guys are at the end of the day. So like life that can be applied, and I think, and certainly in business, networking, like social media, for sure, you don't want to be somebody else, right? Like that can kind of feed into those mental issues that some people are now experiencing after this generation of us like constantly looking online at other people. So
yeah, but I want to fast forward a little bit. Kind of, you went to Algonquin College, did 2 years marketing, then you ended up in Australia, going to school there. What's the story behind that? Like, how'd you end up all the way across the world?
Oh yeah, no, that's a good question. We went to the same college program here in Ottawa, and credit to Bill Garbarino, who we both know. Drop Bill's name. I've definitely not done that on the podcast, but big credit to that guy, because I think he's both a part of our networks and somebody who really looked after students that would like strive to do well in his program, and like use him as a bit of a mentor at times. And he's looked after me, but the program itself was really solid for setting that foundation in terms of understanding marketing and like putting it into use, doing that full marketing plan in your final semester, like understanding from research all the way to implementation, like everything that actually goes into that, which is a hell of a lot. And like quickly, like as you start to learn more about the business world, you understand like how much it really takes to be a CMO of like a successful company, or even in my position, like a head of sales. I'm a young head of sales. I wouldn't say like I could just jump into a head of sales for any big position and take over there. But what led me to going to Australia was just the great school, graduating, feeling like I had the confidence, going for my degree at that point. I knew it was something that I wanted to do, but it wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to jump into, because I wasn't jumping into work right away either. So I just kind of sat back, looked at some of my options, U Ottawa, Carleton, some of the close universities here, a few in the States for some sports management or sports marketing type programs. Both of those were okay, but still a lengthy process to get through to the degree programs there. So like 3.5 years here in Ottawa, maybe 2.5 somewhere in the States. And then Australia came up as a place where they do 3-year bachelor's degrees. So they already shave a year off. You get lucky because that's the same equivalent to what a 4-year would be out here. And then they gave me 1.5 years worth of the credits as part of the articulation agreement with Algonquin and the marketing program towards that degree program. So it left me with 3 semesters of school, essentially to get my degree at another school. And then in the midst of all that, I could travel and do a few of the other things that I had the ambitions to at that point, which was, definitely a great decision. Something I'd never regret. It was expensive at the time, like spending pretty much everything I had to go do that, but definitely worth it, being able to travel through Asia and, parts of Australia and elsewhere. It's a lot of life lessons as much as it was lessons in school, because I think at that point, like, knowledge in marketing, I don't know if you'd attest to this, but like coming out of that program, it felt pretty well-rounded. I felt as though like I knew a few things that maybe they weren't even teaching in the class that we could add to projects. So school wasn't too tough, and it really gave me a chance to kind of like enjoy that experience in Australia, which is dope.
Yeah, it's like looking back on, I feel like a hot topic, big conversation right now is whether post-secondary is worth it, especially for the amount paid. It's like you've kind of alluded to the fact that it was worth it in your case, but do you think in a general case, school is worth it?
Yeah, that's a pretty hot topic to bring up. I would have to agree with you there. It's definitely a bit trendy too, so this one could probably do well on social, but I don't really understand what the idea is with a lot of people bringing up the subject as though they're like a subject matter expert in that area. Maybe Gary Vee, like those guys, you can understand like why they'd be speaking on the topic, given the fact that a lot of people are talking about it. And these are big expenses through life, so you could question the worth if there's not going to be like some significant ROI, which would, be like you getting a job at a school. Some people might feel that it's easier to do that coming out of college, which is a little bit different if anybody's listening in the US than university here in Canada. So if it was up to me, look, like I'd say it was well worth my time. Even the fact that the university degree wasn't necessarily all about the schooling and the learning on that side of things. Like I think I really came away with some of the most valuable life lessons, and just learning about how many options you have in this world and like how endless the possibilities really can be a lot of the time. And then so too, being able to kind of see the world in a little bit of a smaller lens, like it's not so big after all. And those kind of like sayings, "It's a small world," they really like come true. So I don't think people should really have like a major opinion on this type of thing. I think like it's a case-by-case scenario for most people out there. And I definitely would say that like the way it's done here in Canada, or at least in this part of Canada, where you take like guidance counselors and factor those people into the process, which aren't a problem, but maybe don't know students that they're advising very big subjects on that well, or as well as they should. And then you could kind of argue that like if they're guiding them in a certain direction and making the others seem like lackluster or maybe not as satisfactory in some sort of way, what wouldn't be for them, then, you know, like should they really be advising them on that? Because like for me, I definitely decided on college is like a decision that I wanted to make. Like I applied to universities, I applied to college, and college kind of coming out of high school was almost looked down upon because of the way the grades were split up in like university classes and college classes. So that to me in itself is something that should be abolished, because you're just like misguiding people otherwise. You really don't know what the other side looks like. And college was a great experience, and it led me to have that ability where I could travel internationally and get that done in a relatively decent amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's interesting. I feel like that's almost like, I feel like the trendy answer to that question is no, it's not worth it. Like just go and figure it out yourself. So it's interesting to hear the other side, because I feel like for the most part now people are taking the side of it's not worth it just from a cost perspective.
I've seen that too. Like LinkedIn, some just pretty like opinionated videos, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I think if you back up opinion with some sort of logical argument, then yeah, there's no problem with having like a discourse about something where two people don't agree. But when people just kind of throw opinions out there and then it's naturally like shifting people's influence or like that general influence on a platform, maybe like LinkedIn, to believing that school isn't important, yet not really having like a core reason as to why they believe that, is bad. It's like kind of bad for society, because then like more people are ultimately like shifting in that direction of, oh yeah, post-secondary isn't worth it, without even like putting in the time to understand whether or not it could be for a lot of people in a lot of cases, right?
I think like kind of where I land on it now at this point, and I had this conversation a couple weeks ago, is like with the access to online courses and stuff, if you know exactly what you want to do, maybe spending 4 years trying to like go through it all might not be worth it. But if you can do that like specific, like learn exactly what you want to learn in a 2-3 month period, pay a fraction of the cost, like maybe that's a different alternative. I still think learning is important, and you're going to need something to back up what you know. But maybe if you're not looking at like wanting to do that 4 years, there are alternative ways to do it now. But I feel like it's hard to go straight from high school to just like crushing it.
It's a perfect point. Yeah, I think the accessibility has changed. So if you're pretty focused on a given area, like you talked about, and you can go get that like same type of education, but on your own time, and potentially work and gain experience at the same time, I could see a lot of advantages to that. Because, you know, for a lot of, maybe include social as this kind of thing too, you almost have to go out and get the experience before you can really understand like how you're going to succeed in a role like you're in, where you're a bit more of like a digital coordinator and like managing social accounts for a brand that's important, you know, like a city or something like that. So getting that experience at the same time, it's like that's a route a lot of people, I'm sure, are looking at more and more, and should be like.
Yeah. But I want to talk about after you graduated school, you went to San Francisco for a little while.
Yeah.
Like, so why San Francisco? And you went with the intention of like lining up job interviews. So how did you line up all the different interviews in a small window of time?
A lot of applying for jobs while I was still in university in Australia. So like I was kind of honed in on this little bubble of cities, you know, San Fran, LA, San Diego, and just through that SoCal area. To me, my thought process was like, well, I want to go back because, you know, my nanny's sick right now, and when I kind of have the travel access to her, you clearly can't do that in like any sort of normal schedule from Australia and back from North America. So thinking of the closer proximity, and then like having still kind of the same fundamental lifestyle of like surf, you know, some waves out there, ocean, beaches, sand. That was kind of the motivation behind doing all of that applying throughout while I was in university, and I wanted to see what the response would be. So I just kept any positive responses like filed on a little note, and knew that, you know, in like San Fran and around the Los Angeles area and San Diego, I had like all these places that would have my resume on file and were potentially open to interviewing me for some type of position that I applied for in the past. So followed back up on those after I was home for about a month, you know, coming back from Australia, and focused on finding a few more during that month as well, just applying to them a little bit more actively, like at the appropriate time, I suppose. And it was just like, it was a good experience. And the fact that like I would always say to people, especially if you're looking for a career in business of any sort, and really anywhere, you're going to have to go through job interviews, right? So like doing those as practice, even if they may not be exactly what you want to be doing for a particular job in the same city that you are, or going to a completely new city like I was trying to do at the time, it's worth it. And so like I had a string of, I think it was close to 12 to 15 interviews like lined up while I was there for a month, and did like most of them. One or two fell through, got a couple offers out of it, and the idea was I'd go back with one of those offers, use the free trade agreement they had between Canada and the US, and back it up with my degree and a little bit of experience that I'd had at the time, I suppose, and just like hopefully get the 3-year approval to just go live and work in the US. But it was really upon like second thought after getting home following the trip to San Fran that I was like, I don't really have the same kind of funds that I did maybe moving to Australia. Like I'm pretty much broke following that education. So it seemed like easier certainly, but definitely like the wiser idea too, to just stay at home here in Ottawa for a little bit, maybe move back in with my dad and like save a little bit of money so I wasn't forcing myself to live in like the most expensive city in North America at the time. Yeah. Which probably would have set me up for an interesting couple of years. I have the confidence to say I probably wouldn't have failed, but like it would have been difficult. Mm-hmm. Even just to like find a pretty sustainable spot to live for the amount that I would have been making initially. So
yeah, definitely. But I want to jump ahead to Trufan. Can you, if anyone doesn't know, can you kind of give a quick rundown of what Trufan is and how you got involved?
Yeah. I'm going to do my best to keep to like how I got involved part quick, but Trufan itself is a social intelligence platform. That's what we've coined it. So social media audience data that helps brands and influencers in some cases manage their key followers, sell to their existing fans, reward their top fans, and even find new audiences that they can target, which are heavily primed for either conversion or industry awareness on social. And it's been a pretty interesting project, just like an overall interesting experience getting into kind of tech startup space and being venture backed with some really interesting athletes and VCs or angels from around Canada. Feel very fortunate to have gotten involved with the experience, and it had a large part to do with a guy, Swish Goswami, who's got a big personal brand on LinkedIn, and as well, has some like relative influence on Instagram, where he knows guys like Buster Elliott, Buster who's been on the show here. So yeah, it's been like a cool group of people to kind of get thrown in with and like get to meet some fascinating people from time to time. But the thing that really brought Swish and I together was a LinkedIn Local event. Mm-hmm. And at the time, those were just little networking events that were like a spin-off of the community, which started to grow on LinkedIn. And I noticed that they were starting to gain some popularity. They hadn't been done in Ottawa, so I kind of reached out to him and said, hey, like, come be part of the process, because he was in Toronto quite a bit at the time. And so eventually one thing led to another. We ended up organizing the events, brought him in as part of sponsorship money that I got for the event. So that helped, I guess, maybe prove that I could get some work done. Like if I was trying to do something. And yeah, it was like a successful event. Met there in person. He started showing me some like rough ideas that he had built while he was working with Dunk, working with Elliot on that, which is a hyper-focused Instagram account, basketball hyper-focused Instagram account with about 2.2 or 3 million followers. And they were positioning that for the consulting space. So this guy, Mark Zablo, who was working with Chris Paul at the time, when he was moving from LA to Houston, he asked them if they knew of any tools that could like simply identify his top fans in Houston so that they could go out and create some sort of community impact by rewarding those fans and just kind of establishing Chris's name in the market per se. And they didn't really know of anything. That's what led him to kind of conceiving this idea or ideology that we've gone on ever since then, which was late 2017. And yeah, it's just been like a pretty interesting ride. Learned a lot about social media, like a lot about startup and growing a tech company, and just like all of the kind of trials and tribulations or eaves and troughs you go through when you're trying to bring like a baby idea all the way through to, like a venture-backed startup that you're potentially selling to like Fortune 500 clients, which we've slowly started to like break into, which is nice.
Have you guys been keeping an eye on a little bit of Facebook now releasing its own top fans feature?
It's a good question. Yeah, like on the note of social media, we definitely thought that was like validation in a lot of ways for what we were doing, just because to simplify the idea a little bit more, I kind of just threw out a little bit of a blanket statement elevator pitch, but we're integrated with Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, not Facebook, but we analyze and quantify like who your most engaged fans are and influential fans are. That's very much the basis of what we do, and provide kind of like social audience databases that can house not only like the brands that we're working with and their data, but competitor brands, influencers they're working with. So there becomes a lot of capabilities. And I think for us, it was just like great validation to say, hey, like they're trying to say that you should be honing in on what we kind of determine as the Pareto principle applied to social. Like if you think about it from a customer side, like 80% of your revenue coming from the top 20% of your fan base or customer base, it's kind of like the same idea of, probably like 80% of your engagement coming from that top 20% of your social engagement or fan base. And so, that's kind of idea that we're going on. And I think that's what Facebook pretty much represents when they're doing that, but they don't give you access to the actual people. Or has that changed yet?
They have like a little icon on their name.
Yeah.
Now that, but other
you can just see them in like comments and stuff. That you can't actually like click a list and then like see, like Jared's a top fan, or Jacob Kelly's a top fan for Ottawa Redblacks. They don't show you that, do they?
No.
No. That would, which would make it a lot more effective, because then you'd actually know, these are the people that I probably want to be engaging with or rewarding or doing something for on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we try and like provide insights on for Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube to some degree as well.
So talk to me about the life of a startup. What's your day look like? I know you've moved around the country a couple different times. Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, moved around the country. So it started, like I mentioned, at one point in late 2017. I guess I was working on content for the initial website in December of 2017. Swish then brought in a few of the other people that he was speaking with just about the idea in general on the side, who hadn't met each other, and started January 2018, and we started doing these like little weekly calls. So I think it was about a group of 6 and quickly turned to about a group of 4, just for reasons that would come up in a lot of cases, just things that are out of their control. They just couldn't pursue the startup at that time. And we all kind of knew there was going to be a period of time there where remote work was inevitable. Nobody was going to get paid for what they were doing. Like, we were obviously trying to figure out positions and just a variety of things that seem weird. I'll never forget that phone call too. Like, I'm getting on the phone with maybe like 5 people for the first time that I've ever met. And then like, they start kind of rhyming off like, hey, I'm so-and-so, this is my background. And like, I'm not sure if you know Nick Sharma. I've heard of him. Yeah. Pretty impressive young guy, like in the social space. Worked for a couple pretty neat DTC brands, but was actually working for Vayner, I think, last
he was their head of direct to consumer, I think.
Direct to consumer over there.
Yeah, crazy position.
And so he was like announcing what he had done, and I have never heard of this guy before. And there was like Onik, who's our co-founder right now, who's like in Stanford and had like the number 2 app on the App Store at one point. And like these kind of guys that are rhyming off some pretty impressive backgrounds. Tim, who we've had on the show, like he was worked for Social Chain, Lad Bible, and like some like either really big agencies and like pages that have come up throughout the UK. And I was just like, man, like my background is nowhere near as impressive. Like, I don't even know if I want to say any of the places that I worked, but like regardless, nobody was judging on that phone call, and like everybody kind of came from somewhere and they had a reason to be there. So that was cool. And then it really went from there. Like those 4 of us working for what turned out to be about 9 months out of the year, 8 to 9 months without like any pay at all. Initially started developing the product. We were working on Facebook at that point. Like, this is a third-party app or a platform. And so building on top of Facebook, and Cambridge Analytica like unfolded it's like May 2018. Instagram pulled their API to private that same year. Like, kind of like throwing your hands up in the space that we were in. Like, basically have nothing to work off of now. We're gonna have to pivot from our initial product and like virtually restart. Had like a developer go silent as well, so that also gave us another reason to want to pivot and restart. So like mid 2018 now, and still didn't have a product. Was like trying to like work toward either a raise or a way that we could like have some funding to continue building the product, because inevitably it was going to cost more than our initial investment, which was $20,000. And that was from Kieran O'Brien, who's the former head of digital and social media for Western Union, and now works at Signet Jewelers as their head of media and social. So some big companies, and she was like super dope. Been a great advisor, investor ever since we got started. But September came, we had finished the pre-seed round, got some funding, did a first little team retreat where like a few of us who had never met in person finally got to meet each other in Vancouver. So that was cool. And that's where we were thinking of basing ourselves out of, because Ryan Holmes, CEO and founder of Hootsuite, he's also an advisor on our team. So he gave us some free office space, in part because of it's like a social entrepreneurship charity that he had started. Well, it has like a social kind of lens because it's a charity, but they foster entrepreneurship. It's a unique sort of nonprofit that they got started. Anyways, part of that just kind of gave us free office space there. And then once we all started getting paid, I kind of committed to moving to where we could centralize our location. So I drove from Ottawa, where I was working, to Vancouver and signed the year lease. Was expecting to stay there for minimum a year, most likely at that point. I mean, we had the funding, the runway and stuff, so there's no kind of question marks in the air. And then it was like 6 weeks. I got there November. It was like mid-December. We had round 13 commit to an investment. It was a VC from Toronto, which they don't normally do, and that kind of gave our CEO the idea, who had spent time in Toronto and understood how predominant the business market and tech scene is there right now and growing. And it was just like, do we move there? We thought, might as well make that decision now. And so that was between less than 3 months. I literally drove to Vancouver and had to move back across Canada, like you kind of touched on there. So that's what I was kind of getting to in this big story. But in terms of the just process itself, is just at points sheer determination, some points luck, and you know what I mean, just a tremendous learning curve the whole time, but just having to put yourself out there and do things execute, which is a subject we just touched on earlier, and just getting that under your belt over time, just building up these skills. I did graphic design for some times, and I'm definitely not a graphic designer by trade, and starting off this experience, maybe had no experience on Canva. I fell into consulting during the time just because I had to quit my full-time job to focus a bit more time on this. And that was February of 2018, so near the start of the year, and I realized pretty quickly we weren't going to have any sort of funding within 3 months span. So I started doing consulting, mainly for LinkedIn at the time, social media advisory, and some execution stuff. So just been a lot that's happened in this. It's been about 18 months or 19 months, maybe I want to say. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but okay. I just figured I'd kind of spill out the story, and then we can go back on anything. If maybe one of my first ever meetings was literally with you and a few of the guys from OSIC. So it's pretty cool to look back on that, and certainly the product's come a little ways since then.
Definitely. But I want to ask, I watched, because I was doing some research yesterday. One, just a quick aside, I remember I was scrolling through your LinkedIn content, and there's a video that you did with Tim when you all met up in Vancouver.
Oh yeah.
And I watched that when you posted it. And I have had Tim on the podcast, but it didn't register that the guy in that video was the guy I was interviewing 6 months later.
Yeah.
So that just kind of blew my mind a little bit. But I did want to ask, during that time where everything's going a little bit crazy, you're not getting the funding like you thought you would, you're picking up consulting clients to try and make ends meet. I saw in a video that Swish put out when putting the company together.
Yeah.
That when he called you, you're yes, I'm willing to dedicate my life to this idea. What was it about it that made you instantly be I'm all in?
Great question. The surrounding, the areas that it touched, industries and areas of business, areas of marketing, were all very interesting to me. So that kind of made it a little bit easier to buy into this idea, which, at the time, going back into the story a little bit, when he and I met at the LinkedIn local, and then started to continue to touch base on this idea that he kind of shared with me that night, and was I'm going to send you documentation. First, it's kind of what's document? What do you mean by documentation? This is a startup idea? He meant 2 pages in a PDF or something that he'd written up. It's some sort of formalized idea, just to make sure it's real. And then, just thinking about that, and ultimately moving forward to that time when I did tell him, screw it, this would be something I want to dedicate my life to, learning about how sports would be a major component to that, and just seeing where social media was heading and how valuable granular data could be. Just a lot of things, sports, social, my interest inevitably in digital and data and kind of technology, especially. I guess that was a big one, as I had a couple opportunities in my career just earlier that like were more geared towards technology. So like all of these areas kind of culminating in like something that I would be able to like be a part of from the start. And then, it was like I was watching Silicon Valley too. So like there was the odd show that was kind of like, fuck. And a friend would be like, you should quit your job and like do a startup. And I was like, it seems like a lot of risk, but finally becoming okay with that point. Like I'm being worked into the ground in this particular job that I'm in. This seems like a really good opportunity. At least if I'm working my own self into the ground, I'll be working to my own expectation. I'll be on something that I genuinely like. I think the market needs. Seeing like the oversaturation for a couple of predominant business models for quote unquote like tech companies in the influencer marketing space, felt like it was like everything was leading to that moment of like, yeah, you know what? I mean, I'm gonna make this my thing now. And so it was like months after that I just quit my job and was like, you got to focus on this one thing. Like if you focus on trying to do everything, you'll end up accomplishing nothing in the process of that. So yeah, it's a good pickup. I mean, he kind of refers to that moment, but it's a good way to also make an impression on somebody. Yeah. You're like, fuck it, I'll make this my life.
Yeah, definitely. But just to the point you were just making there where you're like, I'm being like run to the ground with the job I'm working currently. That's a similar point that Digital Jeff Meda had on a couple weeks ago. And he was like, when he decided, the moment where he decided to go all in, he was like, if I'm barely getting by doing this job, why don't I just barely get by doing what I want to do anyways? You know what I mean?
It's a huge point because I think you get pressured feeling maybe like you're working on somebody else's dream. Like there's a quote out there that relates to that. Like, would you be rather working on somebody else's dream or your own? Just working to your own expectation. I thought that was a big thing. Knowing I wouldn't have to get like looked over by anybody. We worked remotely forever, and still to this day, like we all have different kind of work styles, and it's a results oriented work environment. So even for some of the new hires, like it's relatively open, and like there's a lot of freedom involved with it, but the expectation that like people are really going to buy into their work as well. And that was kind of something that I liked. Again, gave me tremendous opportunities. Like I could say that like I'm a part equity owner in a tech company that really isn't worth anything yet, but like we're slowly kind of striving towards something. And that's not really something I bring up often, but you know what I mean? Like just like the opportunities that I'm definitely fortunate to have as a result, and something as simple as meeting Tim. And those types of guys, as a result of being part of that project, like these are really like world-class marketing minds, and continually trying to take from those bits of perspective, like I talked about really early on, knowing that like I'm definitely not going to be the best in this space, but like I finally started to realize like, wow, all these things that I've either been like taught from somebody or maybe skills that I've built up through other experiences, like they're actually culminating into like something here, and I can really take this.
That's actually perfect, because my next question was going to be, what's it like going to work every day with just a group of minds like that? Yeah. It'd be like a Swish, a Nick Sharma, who I didn't realize was a part of Trufan at first.
Isn't actually anymore.
Yeah.
So he was one of the ones who had to, unfortunately, kind of keep his career in a certain direction it was headed in, which is definitely good for him. He's like a Forbes 30 under 30 former DTC at Hint, and we talked about Vayner. But yeah, like going into work with these group of minds, man, some days it's really interesting. Other days, like Swish's mind is always on, so he'll probably attest to this any day of the week. Like, you'll never really know when you might get a message from him, but like there's almost always one coming each day. So if you didn't get one, like by the time you go to sleep, expect to wake up to a few of them, you know what I mean? So it's not even almost sometimes going into work. It's like I'm always at work, and like work follows me wherever I go. Like while I'm here in Ottawa this week, I'm lucky that I can just work from the place that I'm staying, and there's always something to do. So it doesn't ever feel like some sort of burden, which is the biggest thing. Like waking up to go to work, like I definitely wake up and enjoy what we're doing and like what we're striving towards. But like sometimes, there's like people have different ideas, and sometimes you can get along, other times maybe not. Swish is like a really brilliant young mind, as is Onik. Like was going to Stanford for one of those cross courses between business and computer science. So like at a school like that, in a course like that, these guys are young, and they bring really fresh ideas and attitudes and just a style of work like that I was talking about. So not always in the office together, but it's really fun. Like, next week going to work, we'll be going to NBA Summer League in Vegas, and then LA shortly thereafter for some meetings, potentially even meeting Kawhi's sister. That would be pretty cool. And then San Diego coming back home. So
that's crazy.
Keeps things interesting.
Yeah. But another thing that you guys have done with Trufan that I'm interested to talk about is you've been producing content quite a bit, and you've tried to make that a big part of your strategy. And why is that? Like, I have my ideas why, but I kind of want to hear it like from your perspective as to why you guys are making
if
content.
You could share, like, as somebody who probably understands where we're coming from, like, what would be, you think, the main goal, like, asking me that question? Because you certainly have some ideas.
Yeah.
So what would your first answer be?
My answer would be because it allows people, one, to like kind of like connect with your company better. Whereas, because like typically with the SaaS product, like it's hard to like connect with it. Like I use Dropbox all the time, but I'm not connected to Dropbox. You know what I mean?
Certainly. Yeah.
Like
it's hard to put like a name to that or a face to that Dropbox
you guys are
name.
Giving like a really personal feel to Trufan, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you're producing content. Like I said, like that video I watched for Swish was talking about how he found the team and putting that here. Like it just kind of helps the audience connect with the company more.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's
and I think like there's so much you could say. I think at the spout it starts with content, and you're a big believer in content. Certainly, a lot of the people who've been on this podcast are heavily into content, and it's some like major part of their life. I think it starts with like believing in what the content that you're putting out is going to attract, and like you're going to find new audiences first of all, but you're also, like you said, going to be able to put a bit of a face or multiple faces to the name of the brand. Like you're always going to be out there in somebody's newsfeed. Given the fact that we're kind of bridging a lot of our personal brands on LinkedIn, initially when we started, like that was a pretty easy way to slowly gear some of that interest towards the company and at least start to build some of the brand awareness and the recognition that's out there. It was interesting. I mean, it's interesting that you ask it because I think about, finding new audiences. Like the other day, when I say the other day, it was more like 2 weeks ago, a few of us just got approached on LinkedIn, like from this guy who was working for it was actually something where a couple of your colleagues were there, Canada Sports Analytics Conference, but I think they refer to it as the Sports Analytics World Series. It's like a series of events they have around the world, which is kind of cool. Good name. But they approached us and like offered us basically free tickets for this. And I didn't really, like nobody understood why. I don't even think we fully understood they were offering free tickets before our CFO, I think, messaged them back saying, oh, we don't have budget for something like this right now. And they were like, oh, well, like tell us how many you might be interested in if you're interested in it. So I think at some point along the line, like, I don't know how that person may have found out about us, whether it's maybe more press side and leaking out that type of content, which definitely included some of our faces as well, or just some of the video content across any one of those platforms. And then finding those people. And then at that conference, it was interesting to see like the brand recognition that Trufan actually has. And like, I'll make no secret, like I'm not going to share our financials, but like we're still in very early stages as a tech company and like making slow strides for growth, starting to pick up a momentum on a sales side and like slowly starting to really turn that wheel, but still like a long way to go. Yet people seem to understand and like really believe in what we're doing. And they notice us, like we can kind of get picked up by a few people who will be around the conference and just saying, oh, like I've heard of that brand, or they walk on over to you and it's like, I've seen you on a video. So all of those things are incredibly invaluable. And building that kind of face for your brand and making it a little bit more personable, I think is the key. You know what I mean? Like telling stories and kind of telling that story behind like why we are what we are and why we exist and how we've come to be, which we tried to do in like a processing series. And then going back to like the start of the answer, content and the belief in that, Swish, our CEO, being around like those heavy kind of pillars of social media and some of the people like within that New York market that seems to be a relatively global, or where the global bubble starts for like social media people. He was definitely in that, and I think he's going to always maintain that belief of how important it is to be putting out content on each one of those platforms. So I don't think we'd be able to like do it any other way, even if I wanted to, you know what I mean? But media is important, and like we're starting a podcast, so it's kind of hand in hand, like having that audio and how that can kind of drip towards LinkedIn content, even if it isn't video, using the audiograms. Yeah, it's important having those sources of media and mediums.
And you mentioned how you guys are like using your personal brands to kind of drive the company on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is what I want to talk about in a second. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about that you guys are doing that's a little bit different, if people are watching on video, they can see that you're wearing a Trufan hat right now.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So
I
like,
forgot that you had video going, actually.
Yeah. So why are you guys producing merch for like a software company, analytics company?
To save a little time on this answer, I will say you can kind of read a more in-depth version of this answer on our blog or our Medium page. But because we wrote a little article about that when we did create the shop, which would be over a year ago now. And I think it was in part because I got a good connection that just happened to come from LinkedIn, like happened to notice what we were up to, like in very early stages when it was just like me making some sort of selfie video of some recent updates and like a couple of very minor wins, you know. But he was from San Diego and they were working on this kind of drop shipping solution where he has access to about 100,000 different products you can mock your logos up on. So like vast majority and like the quality stuff. And was willing to make us a free website. And I think seeing where our brand was headed, maybe knowing that he could get some other business opportunities down the line, which he since has. But he's been a great, like, kind of just partner for us. This guy's name is Ross. Runs a small, almost startup-oriented e-commerce type business called Brain Sauce. And yeah, they approached me with it probably between about April to May of 2018. And it seemed like such a good idea because what do they call it? Those like brand anchors or like brand staples or something along those lines.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't think of...
You know, like one of those things that you kind of is synonymous with the brand or that you kind of associate. And like, so me like wearing this hat right now, my girlfriend would probably say I wear this hat too much, but like I try if I get a haircut to like not wear a hat as much. But most of the time I'm wearing it. And so if I wear it to a networking event, like that's my LinkedIn profile. I'm wearing it in some videos that are definitely on LinkedIn. And I'm usually trying to put more content out there. Little headshots for speaking arrangements if they come up or podcasts. And so it's like building that like brand for yourself combined with, you know what I mean? You can do those two at once, I guess a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know, the hats have been kind of popular. We try to like give them away to people here and there. I've given you one, and we'll be out in Vegas, like I said, for Summer League, and certainly giving away some merch there because it's just like same kind of thing. You never know when that can drip onto content and like who's going to find out about it. But more than anything, it's just brand awareness. Like if you could have walking billboards, would you want them or would you like say no to them? You know what I mean? It's not that heavy cost. We don't spend a ton of money on it, but it's definitely worth it to have your brand walking around out there.
Yeah, and I wear my hat all the time. Like
they're kind of just like a nice black hat. Everyone likes a black hat, and we've gotten some good reviews on the logo over time. So
I was gonna say it's a clean logo. It's a good look. Like it's sweet. But I do want to get into LinkedIn and social now. So what was the reason behind you really diving into LinkedIn, going to produce content around your personal brand?
Solely just seeing the opportunity cost if I didn't, as somebody who had the marketing background, and knowing that where I was in my career, if I started to put myself out there and just like try and create content, which was something I wasn't super comfortable in or didn't have like a lot of chops in, but when it became video, creating video was just how it could get me to a point in my career that I really wanted to be. So a bit of personal development, a ton of professional development in the process, continuous learning, knowing that like I really always want to be learning. And there was clearly an opportunity there because you started to notice just like, I think when videos came out, it really started to be like, wow, you could see views on every single video that was out on LinkedIn. And not everybody had it, but I just like, happened to have it. And I was like, shit, like seems like a lot of views to be giving away. Like from what I know about maybe Instagram, it seems like there'd be a pretty big opportunity here to start creating more and more content. So it's just what I did. And with a steady flow of trying to stay active in the community itself and really get to know like a few of the key pieces and start to see them more and more on LinkedIn. And, that was where I saw people like Swish initially before I connected with them. And LinkedIn has everything to do with like Trufan being an opportunity today for me to explore. And yeah, it's just like I kind of said, for any objective out there, whether that be personal, professional, brand development, like anything, there's probably a way that you can use LinkedIn to help you achieve those goals. Mm-hmm. So from a marketing side, like being able to then turn that into consulting and apply some very similar principles to the way I was able to carve out a bit of a personal brand to a guy with gray hair who's been a CMO for like 20 years, very different stage of his life than I am. But again, just like, you ultimately use social media as marketing tools for the brands that you work for. And so just a lot of those same principles, but it was still such an early stage. And, even some of those main influencers on that platform in particular were kind of shouting about the white space that existed for people creating content, like under 1%, which it might still be of the entire user base on LinkedIn, which is crazy.
And so I think there is a huge opportunity still on LinkedIn, even though people have been talking about it for so long.
Facts.
I know that like I need to get on. I think I probably say it probably once every 2 months. Like, I gotta go all in on LinkedIn now. And I don't. And like, I just keep reminding myself that I have to do this. And like more and more is like the Instagram algorithm. Like I just keep seeing my likes just they're trending downwards, consistently going down.
Yeah.
So I mean, like I know I have to get on LinkedIn, and I think a beautiful part about LinkedIn that I've noticed from my time just kind of like going around the platform and seeing what other people are doing is high produced quality content, like from a visual standpoint, isn't the norm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? Like the barrier of entry, if you're trying to become like a YouTuber, feels bigger because there's such, like you have to get that like perfect camera and get the perfect angles, whereas LinkedIn, it's like a guy driving to work and he'll throw his camera on his dash and hit record. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a good point you bring up, because like I'd have to say from my experiences, both as it relates to like consulting for somebody else and just putting out videos of my own, the more informal videos, and typically as well, like if you can include somebody else in there as more of an interview style, but just generally the more informal it is, just the best performance comes from those types of videos, which is strange. Because I know the guy who I've done work with for a little while, he has a video producer now, and some of them will be a little bit more like professionally produced, and it's not to say like his performance goes down, but you do see that uptick every time he just like decides to record a quick one from the airport or something like that after a conference. And it could have a bit to do with the content, but you got to imagine, like if you see content as much as I do sometimes, it's like, okay, well, that has nothing to do with anything more than the video itself and the fact that he just started like holding his camera like this, and it was like started as a selfie video. So strange, because it's not the norm on like Instagram or YouTube, especially like where you talk about what do they call those thumbnails?
Yeah,
it's like everything on that platform, right? Like that's built people careers.
It's crazy. And like, what about subtitles? Do you subtitle? You do quite a bit, eh?
Yeah, been a pretty big fan of that since I saw other people starting to do it. I think like for the accessibility side of it, it's important. And then as well as it just seems to perform better, given LinkedIn is like a lot of people may be using that in their workplace. And, you know, when I realized the opportunity cost that existed, like I was working at a recruiter's office at Robert Half Technology. So business development focused on technology specific contracts. And so I had LinkedIn open every single day, like being in kind of the HR recruitment world. And that's where you really start to like notice the opportunity cost that existed on that platform. But yeah, the captions, people are on the computer during their day, you know what I mean? So they're probably not going to be listening to it out loud. Maybe they have headphones on, but you can bank on the fact that if you have a little bit of interest from them and there's captions, then they'll probably be geared to watch the whole video because they can actually just read it.
I don't know if this is a new feature. I noticed it literally yesterday when I was scrolling through LinkedIn doing some research on you.
A lot of new features lately, I think.
They have closed captioning now on the
computer. Yeah.
It does a pretty good job. Like
does it do live?
Like automatically, like closed like does subtitles for you on LinkedIn. The bar's a little weird where it's almost like it takes up probably 25% of the screen, but it automatically does subtitles for you now, which I thought was interesting. But it's not on the phone yet, and I was like, if it was on the phone, that would be so clutch. Because subtitling clips takes so long.
That would be. Have you tried it like just where it automates your subtitles though? Because in my experience, it was just they had like an option to insert an SRT, but maybe it's maybe like, they've added like an auto captioning service now. I guess they have.
Yeah, like it literally just like there's like a closed captions button on the desktop that you click and it just does it, but not on mobile. So it's like if people are listening at work, then maybe I don't need to take the time to do the subtitles if they're watching on the computer.
Interesting. I don't think a lot of people record videos on their desktop though.
No, I mean like if you're like on LinkedIn on your desktop scrolling.
Yeah.
The videos, not if you're producing like the videos.
Oh, on LinkedIn, wow! Okay, like so just for consuming the content. Interesting.
Yeah. So I was hoping that makes the jump to mobile, but it takes up a large chunk on the screen. But it's just handy. But I was curious because like with your videos on LinkedIn, like I was looking at the numbers. You get 10,000 views regularly on LinkedIn. So do you have any?
There was a while, yeah.
Yeah.
I granted, I haven't been producing as much content as I should have been recently, and it's just in part because like certain responsibilities at Trufan really are like my core priorities, and as much as I value creating content on LinkedIn, even just more so for B2B purposes, like sometimes my time can be spent in some other areas, and those other areas are a little bit more valuable time spent than recording a video or just getting upset like 10 times in a row as I'm trying to record a video. That can get annoying for anyone out there who does get a bit frustrated with content creation at times. Like, I'm sure Jacob is with you with me on this, but it can make you pull your hair out sometimes. But in terms of tips for actual videos, I touched on a couple, like starting your video as a selfie. It's been something that works. You touched on closed captions or just like creating that, but I guess if they're already doing it for you, it may not be as big a deal. Creating SRT files can be a bit of an annoyance or nuisance, like put it that way. YouTube is okay for it, but interviews I would say are something that has long kind of generated interest, and you can definitely position those in different ways. In terms of just like the content creation as a whole, I think having 3 or 4, if you can stretch to 4, even 2 to 3 different areas that your content relate to. Like one, maybe the brand. Like for me, I think I oversaturate my network right now with LinkedIn content about Trufan, or the last maybe like 2 months I have. So like I really need to kind of push that out to another theme of maybe just like interviewing a smart marketer or somebody in social. And there's a lot of ways you can kind of subtly tie that into Trufan. So I think that the main thing when it comes to your content creation though is like any good marketer, and people who create content on the platform may not be marketers, but starting with an objective is key, because you can really like start to hone in on whatever it is you're doing and how that's going to eventually lead to you achieving that end objective. So whether that is finding a new job or starting to connect with HR professionals in a particular space, like you can probably tweak your content so that it at least provides backup or something that you can send to those HR professionals if you want to connect with them, or that helps them find you. Maybe more so geared towards the community that would be using LinkedIn. Like if you're looking to find a job in a specific place, just that like the get-go, build a personal brand of different pieces of content that relate to the skill set you need to get that particular job, whether that's interviewing people who have done it before and actually have like a really good understanding if you don't, or just making your own videos of some consolidated information that you can pull from the web and different sources, or just know from education. Like so much you can do, but I think the main thing just begins with like a few basics, just recording. I mean, if you can have a gimbal or something like that to make it a little bit smoother on the eye, like rather like less bumpy, and that's always good. But you just got to start putting video content out there. And when you stop like I have, just even for like a week, you get a little bit comfortable, and it's just like, oh, I can bang a bit more workout, and until what point you're just kind of like, oh, I know the value that's out there when I'm doing this, like I got to get back on it. Kind of in that feeling right now, but this helps me do that. So. Yeah,
it's good. Like I said, I'll cut everything and I'll send it your way if you want to use any of this stuff.
Well, I was going to say, like for you were talking about the need to get on LinkedIn more. I mean, first of all, Jacob, I've seen your goals for like 2019 social media. Yeah. They're already
weekly goal on their weekly video.
Absurd, which is pretty impressive. Like if everyone listening has probably listened to Jacob, given the fact that you're listening to the podcast, but this guy works really hard. You are like ready with ammunition when you want to go at LinkedIn hard, because like a lot of the content that I've seen you produce for the podcast, even if it's just the pictures and stuff like that and sharing those episodes on there, it's something that's going to resonate with that like marketing and specifically digital and social community that's out there, which you already I'm sure are well aware of, but like you know what I mean, you can kind of hit that platform when the time is right, so you still have some time.
Like my thought process is like, do I want to push just podcast content? Or do I want, because I think what my intention with LinkedIn is I want to have the time where I'm producing content where I'm on the camera. Because for the most part, my podcast content is about the guest. So I want to kind of also find the time to be producing content that validates that I know what I'm talking about. And this is why I'm interviewing these people on my podcast, if that makes sense. And like you said, like just throwing my camera up and doing a quick selfie video doesn't take that long. So I should overcome that hurdle. And the other problem I have too, which I've noticed this is a common thing, when I think of posting on social, my brain instantly goes to Instagram. Like I have to post I got new podcast, first platform I post is Instagram. But I think I need to change where my brain defaults into posting on social. If I can try and rewire my thought process to, I need to make a social post, first place is LinkedIn. Just because organic reach is so high right now, and organic reach on Instagram is so low.
It's true, eh? Yeah, that's always a good way of doing it. I mean, you bring up a really good point there in that mindset shift, because that was actually something that I had to do to just get in a habit of interacting with that community more, because I think the other thing that will help generate a bit more, well, views and like just get your profile seen a lot more through that LinkedIn algorithm is being active in the community and like commenting on other posts that are out there. So like rather than opening Facebook, and even Instagram is probably the biggest one even for me when I was switching, but like there did become a time where I'd officially noticed myself like make that mindset switch where I was always opening LinkedIn up first. And I have to say, like, kind of I say this not feeling too comfortable about this idea, but I think I'm back to Instagram, and so maybe that's part of the reason why I haven't been producing as much content, because it's so much easier to get pulled into consuming content when you're on Instagram as opposed to always maybe creating it. But creating it is easier on Instagram too, so like there's a lot of things that kind of factor into that want to just like be like, I have 20 minutes I can dedicate to social, like we're going to do a few things on Instagram, we're going to try and like make one piece of content for LinkedIn. But batch recording, I mean, you've probably done it before, maybe for like one or two things, even if it's at work, for a variety of ideas, but like that can help. And so maybe if you do some batch recording, then you can start to like mix those kind of videos in. Even at work, if you're meeting some other people who work in the social space the odd time, like just taking that quick selfie video, or if it was like a lesson after work one day and like trying to build a bit of that storytelling content. Doesn't have to be that polished like you talked about, so like that can be like a really valuable thing, and then maybe before you know it you have enough clips that you can just like start sharing them out, because it doesn't have to be too frequent. Like I think if you really want to build on Instagram, you got to be like committed to not necessarily posting every day, but always daily stories, maybe posting if you can every day, if not every second day. Whereas LinkedIn, I think like one time a week is a good start. If you can go with maybe like 1 to 4 times a week, you're definitely going to start to like see those views and stuff like that start to pick up over time. But the other part that factors into it is just being engaged and like being active on the platform, unless you're brilliant at sparking conversation, but like that can be something that's key to you just getting that sustainable engagement from people who know and want to see your content out there.
I think that I know that I can definitely post on LinkedIn 1 to 4 times a week, because right now my content's pivoting to I'm like twice a day on Instagram at least. So like I know that it's within my bandwidth where I can find a way to post on LinkedIn at least once a week. But a hurdle that I always find is timing of post.
True.
Have you noticed that LinkedIn, like it's typically works within that 9 to 5 time frame when people are on it at work? Like, because usually when I think of finally coming home and producing a LinkedIn video, like the way my day works usually is I'll come home around 5:30, and my game plan is literally I will go straight to my laptop and I'll start editing podcast content or clips or like different things like that. And then by the time I get around, like, well, I should make a LinkedIn video, it's like 8:30, and I'm like, if I film it, post it now, is anybody going to be watching?
You're also like, I gotta eat dinner.
Yeah, I mean that's at some point, but like,
yeah. No, you're right. I'd say from my experiences, you can kind of point to certain time zones, and I think some people would say like their Sprout Social or some like platform like that they're maybe taking performance metrics from is recommending that they post at what might be between 11 and 2 p.m. Eastern or something, even a bit later, so it still factors into Pacific time. But yeah, people are at work during that time, which is something that seems to feed into the algorithm more and more. When I first got started on LinkedIn though, and really like when I was producing the most content that I was during that time, like on a consistent basis, at some points every day, it was almost just the goal of getting it out every single day, because different days would kind of leave me in places that I couldn't get out of, whether it be work commitments or networking or something like that, until late that day. And like sometimes we would be posting at like 11 p.m. or whatever, but like when I got in that habit, I was posting so much that everything seemed to like resonate at least a little bit and get some traction. So maybe that had a bit to do with it. I think it really just has to do with the content though on that platform. Like if somebody's thinking about the opportunity cost that like I was kind of thinking about initially, and like whether they should make a bit of that jump to like start creating content, like it doesn't have to be video. First of all, you can just like right behind a screen and like show pictures of yourself, or maybe it's not even yourself, you share like PDFs and stuff like that. They have some cool features. So just like start spreading that knowledge, but start getting it out there. And ultimately, like there's not that much of an expectation, so you just have to build it and slowly build your community. But yeah,
What about like connecting with people? Do you accept every connection or request you get? Are you constantly sending them out? Like, how does that look for you?
Don't send too much out. Most of the ones I send will be either somebody who I've met as a result of Trufan and just like a prospect, or somebody who's turned into a customer, or if I'm prospecting. Like one of the things I'm doing for Vegas right now, just because I'm going there next week, is like we have a few people that I can meet while I'm there. Well, like as a team we're going to be meeting, but there's definitely some companies there, like, Zappos, the Golden Knights, some of the hotels and resorts like MGM Grand Resorts or whatever. Those are solid targets. And so like I start with a LinkedIn, like more of a friendly message, just kind of like saying that like, hey, I'm going to be in town. Like, it look like you have a pretty cool background and do some interesting work, like kind of related to what I'm doing right now. So I would love to like sit down over a beer or something like that and chat it up real quick. Then I'll kind of pivot over to, if nothing comes from that over a day or two now, and just trying to get over the phone or send them like a video email. But that's like the underrated part about videos that I should add. I kind of meant to touch on this earlier, was whether it's like LinkedIn or social as a whole right now and like the focus on them. Some of the ways that people don't talk about it as much is like using it from more of a sales side. And like all the ways that can even trickle into like better open rates through email and more traditional but not traditional marketing channels. So it's just fucking powerful medium right now.
Yeah, I think an interesting thing too, like I heard you say, it might have been on one of the podcasts that I listened to that you were on, and I think you said something along the lines of like, you'll get like thousands of views on a LinkedIn video, but no one's paying you to make a LinkedIn post yet. You know what I mean? As far as I know. It's not like a YouTuber where once you start getting a ton of views, people are like, okay, I'm going to sponsor your video. Like, no one's sponsoring your LinkedIn content. But the thing with LinkedIn is, if you're getting these thousands of views, it's likely going to lead to some form of business. It might not necessarily be related to your content, but like maybe someone watches your video and then they bring you in to do some consulting or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's a variety of ways you can monetize. Is that kind of where you're getting at? Is like monetizing the platform a little bit?
It's not like direct where someone's just going to sponsor your video.
Certainly not, but I see brands coming around to that pretty quickly, because I know like athletes and different entertainers and people like that like are slowly seeing maybe a bit of the opportunity that exists on the platform. Either that, or they're like talent manager or somebody who's advising them on social or executing for them is recognizing it for them. But brands would probably find that powerful, like if an athlete could get X amount of views in the business market, like where he still kind of carries that influence maybe, but it could be for a different product, or like not so much a consumer orientation, maybe even B2B related stuff. So like I think you maybe see more of that in the future, but there are some people who are monetizing the space, like who have maybe a business page that's highly catered towards sales. And I think the influence as it exists on that platform right now is more so from a B2B side of things than like the traditional B2C way of using influencer marketing on mediums like Instagram. Because, on Instagram, it's just like visual, like highly captive content that's like kind of quick and flashy and moving a lot. Obviously like a very aesthetic platform, and so brands can really use that to their advantage. And I think because of like that and how it caters to the B2C market, and then LinkedIn catering to a lot more B2B buyers on that platform, first of all. So then like, how do you get more in front of more buyers? Or if it's a B2B company who's maybe doing webinars, right? Like, how can you use people who are influential in a space to maybe like tag team, and you're paying them just like a flat retainer just to do 1 or 2 sponsored posts that kind of like shout out this upcoming webinar, because those are leads, right? Like they're collecting as like marketing qualified leads if somebody's gonna then sign up for that webinar. So there is a bit going on there. I've been privy to that working doing the consulting that I have, and then I think the other aspect is like you talked about consulting is like, for me, that definitely led me to like actually be able to make a little bit of a living alongside a focus on a startup that I wasn't getting paid at, and do so on like a max 10-hour work week, which is like very, very flexible, very easy on me, obviously. And there's so many people who understand a lot about the platform because they're just like so immersed in it and spending a lot of time. I haven't been that way more recently, but like I'm always kind of staying attached to it and keeping an eye on what's going on. A lot of new features coming out on that platform, like LinkedIn Live has been something that was beta tested recently. I'm sometimes a bit skeptical at the way they make decisions to roll out certain features at LinkedIn. I don't know how well thought through like either the qualification process is or just the general strategy that they're deploying when they're launching some of these features. because they seem to really like regionally beta test or like selectively if it was live video in that case. And like some of the people then who start to do it, like you question if somebody doesn't have access, who's like creating really valuable content, especially valuable to like that platform. It's like, why? Like, you know, if I know that this person's trying to get it, why does this person not have it? And yeah, it's not everybody can have everything, I guess, but soon everybody will have access to that. I just think that like going forward, they need to be a little more cognizant about their community, because like people putting a lot of time and effort into these things, they also, I think, expect time, effort, and resources, right? Like in this case, maybe somebody who I knew, even not getting access to it, you could start to question, like, is it all worth it then if I'm not going to get access to this like seemingly simple feature that is like on all the other platforms right now?
What about other social? I've noticed like with LinkedIn, like there's not much crossover between other social accounts. Like some of the bigger people I follow on LinkedIn, like I just don't see them like having huge YouTube followings or huge Instagram followings. Like one that jumps to mind is like Quinton Allen. I just thought like he has like 6,000 followers on Instagram. I think that's the biggest crossover that I've really seen.
Yeah, I think like for a while I even thought that Swish's was quite large.
True,
and
I
know when his was small. Like I kind of just started following him and saw him on Instagram and noticed that it was like pretty small. But during his time at Dunk, like they must have done a couple of things that like really helped growth hack him up there. That being said, you're right. Like for me, what worked when it came to LinkedIn versus some of the other platforms that I really hadn't spent much time developing either like skills on. I spent a bit of time on Instagram for a period of time. I grew an account called like Travel for World Change, and but still like I wasn't that focused on it like while I was in school for business and marketing. And I really could be. Like I was traveling in Australia, like typically if you're like in those parts of the world, you could really capitalize and create some cool content that would help me grow a following. And like, you know, maybe thinking back now, I'm kind of like, oh, should I capitalize on that opportunity? But I just found those platforms relatively shallow in a sense, and saw them as marketing tools, given that like I took marketing. And so that's kind of just like the lens that I saw it in for quite some time. And when I started to realize like, you know, the community was a lot different than say an Instagram, for particular than it was on LinkedIn. That LinkedIn was a bit more of an open community, and I feel like a bit more comfortable on sharing content on there. And that led me to kind of take that first stride and really start consistently creating content and try and make that a bit of a thing for me, and develop a personal brand. So I think that has a lot to do with why people don't have sizable followings across like Instagram, Twitter, and maybe even YouTube in some cases when they do on LinkedIn, because they saw the opportunity on that platform for similar reasons maybe to what I did. There's also a lot of coaches out there. It's like we live in the world of a million coaches if you're on LinkedIn a lot, but the opportunities were there, and a lot of those people, I would imagine, they didn't really resonate with some of the other platforms and the content that was being produced on there either. So I think that could have to do with it a little bit. But, you know, guys like Quinton, to his credit, he didn't have much before he started to develop a following on LinkedIn. And I think he had tried at one point in time, maybe even to be a YouTuber. But like those, you know, platforms are hard to grow a following on. Like it's genuinely, you could be really trying, just not hitting for whatever reason. So when they started to do that on LinkedIn, I think they, you know, the smart ones, especially like myself, I probably should be trying to do a bit more of it. And again, trying to do a bit more LinkedIn content as well. But they're slowly starting to shift a bit of their following over to those other platforms, because they also recognize the value behind an Instagram versus a LinkedIn, where that's like really where the masses are, and you can get paid, you know what I mean, as part of having a bit of a following on that network.
It's in the same vein of like everyone's a coach now, and there's so many coaches on LinkedIn. How do you feel about the word expert? Because I feel like the word expert, more often than not, is a self-given term.
That's a great, fascinating question. I would almost want to ask you about how you feel, well, entrepreneurship, another word that I think people have different views on, but I heard a really good conversation between you and Brandon Thatcher, like on entrepreneurship. That was one that like really stuck out from that podcast in my mind, and I like the view that he had on it. I have a really similar view. I think expert is just one of those things that like, when you were looking at my content, did you happen to roll upon a post where like I kind of made a bit of a, I don't know, splash when an old guy had left a bit of an opinionated post on LinkedIn didn't exactly resonate with me because he was like, I'm sick of all these effing like 20 something experts that tell me everything I need to know about whatever is like digital marketing or something like that, like ads. And he was referring to Facebook without mentioning Facebook, but like kind of singled out 20 somethings and like in a very shameful way. That would, like, if people were seeing that and they were debating on like creating content as a 20 something when they maybe don't have that much to say, really discourage them from doing so. So like, I recognize there's a need to not like overstate your understanding of something and maybe misrepresent yourself as an expert. But I also think like any expert who's maybe in the position of buying, which is really the only situation you can be where you could get fooled by a fake expert, would know to do their due diligence and some sort of form of research before like engaging in the services of a so-called like expert who, you know, had an ad on Facebook and was just talking about like how much he'd made working remotely, traveling the world last month. Like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, did you do a background check on this person if you actually signed up for whatever course or like coaching offering they might have had? There's a lot of talk about experts out there, but like, you know, people all have a vague understanding of many subjects. Some of them have a really good understanding about one subject. Like, do your due diligence if you're going to be a buyer. Otherwise, it's just like, there's no need to complain because you're just playing into those guys' hands. You know what I mean? Like, that's what kind of frustrated me. The one that you might get so frustrated that you start to portray that on social, where like those people are then winning and other people who are just getting grouped into this like generalization are getting discouraged from like joining the community on that platform, which they should feel open to do. And that particular instance, that old guy who kind of like had a bit of a rant post. It was like Saturday Night Rant or whatever. Somebody who had like listened to in a podcast, in like Growth Experts podcast, and just not somebody I would follow anymore. You know what I mean? So like, there's no good place for those people that claim to be experts and maybe aren't an expert of something, but like, nobody should really be trying to say like this person's not an expert and I am, or shaming the people who are trying to go about making a business for themselves or just putting themselves out there into the open and trying things that a lot of people would be uncomfortable with.
That's fair. Yeah, I do. I like that. Like I just feel like the term expert is a little bit sticky, but that makes it feel like better, like the way you've kind of explained it there and laid it out. And I guess like as you're talking, you realize like you also need to own that you know what you know. Yeah. I feel like, yeah, guys, I'm not really an expert, but like I saw a video on this. Like you have to own that you know what you're talking about. Yeah. So I think that
I wouldn't self-proclaim to be like a LinkedIn expert. I just know there's people out there who are probably better than me at that. But like the guy who I work with would probably term me a LinkedIn expert, or at least like up to a certain point, he has done that before. So one thing I was just going to add was basically, I think if another person's called you an expert, who either like knows a lot about how hard you've worked in a particular space, has worked with you in that particular space, or like has been with you when you studied a space, then if you want to term yourself an expert, you shouldn't feel that bad to do so.
That's fair.
But like, you probably shouldn't be the first one to call yourself an expert.
Yeah.
Maybe you haven't earned it.
Yeah, that's kind of like where my feeling was. Like, if you're the first person to call yourself an expert, that's like probably the best way to explain it. That's where I kind of get it. Yeah. But I wrote down a couple social, like the state of social and some trends and stuff I'm seeing that I wanted to kind of run by you.
Yeah, I'd love that.
The first one being Instagram removing likes. It's a big one right now. Up here in Canada, they've removed likes from the platform. How do you feel about them doing that decision? Do you think they should take a platform wide? Do you think it was kind of a weird thing to do? Where do you land on it?
I think good for mental health. There's nothing wrong with being more focused on the content rather than the performance of it, and like what I would probably coin as vanity metric. Just because like, although something can get a lot of likes, like you said, I don't know, maybe if that has been affecting the likes going down on Instagram, but like, at the end of the day, the algorithm has quite a bit to do with it, and the content has something to do with it as well. I think people should just be able to enjoy the content, and then vice versa. Like, you're not constantly worried about maybe how many likes you're getting. You're a bit more tempted to post, which is a good thing for the community and the platform as a whole. Like, more people that are using it regularly, like the more success they're going to have, the longevity will increase as a result of that as well. So, perfectly okay with that one. Also on a business side, like we analyze comments on Instagram quite a bit too, so those become even more valuable, in which case I would not mind if they push this platform wide. More people would just have an issue finding out what their vanity metrics were, and so yeah, we often talk about vetting engagement, and particularly as it relates to influencer marketing. So I think like if they were to just wipe likes out completely, like vetting that comment section for an influencer or just like using comments as a way to gauge who's really engaged on the platform will become even more valuable.
Yeah, and I like that when you started that point, you started it with like good for mental health, because I feel like when a lot of people have this conversation, at least kind of in the world that I live in, when people talk about Instagram removing likes, the first reaction is, well, what about influencer marketing? Like, how are they going to tell her? People should start, but it's like, and I talked about this like I just recorded a couple days ago, so it's not out yet at the time of us recording this, but a takeaways episode from my podcast, and I said that like the intention behind removing likes isn't an influencer marketing based decision, it is a mental health based decision.
Yeah.
And there are still ways for you to figure out how to do influencer marketing and who's legit and who's not, even if you can't see likes.
Right.
You know what
Most
I mean?
influencers typically have business accounts too, right? Which means they would be able to see their likes.
Exactly.
At the end of
So
the
they
day.
can still report on them.
Yeah, so they should be able to report on them. So like that kind of stuff, I can understand like the kind of urge to want to jump and like panic, but I think that also speaks to like certain people at some level that maybe like a little older, or maybe not, but like higher up in an organization, especially within a marketing department. It seems like from my experience, a lot of people don't even know the first thing about influencer marketing and like maybe focused on some of the wrong things. And like if they are tremendously focused on likes, I don't know if that's necessarily a good judge at like how well influencers are performing for your brand. You know what I mean? Because let's just say there's a lot of really simple solutions out there, and I call them solutions for the influencer as a way to earn their pay, that buy you fake likes.
And then how do you feel about influencer marketing? If you were going to do a campaign, like typically, like are you trying to strictly get conversions? Like, is it an awareness thing?
It's a good question. I would almost wonder what your answer to that is. Maybe in the space that you play into, like within the sports space, but I'll give it like my 2 cents. I think what you're looking for from an influencer engagement is ultimately similar to like what you're looking for a particular ad set on like Facebook or Twitter. Like, are you looking for awareness? Are you looking for clicks? Are you looking for conversion directly? Those are 3 different things. Like I heard of a campaign for a brand that I'm definitely not going to name because I'm not sure if I'm supposed to know this, but like they launched recently. They ran a couple influencer marketing campaigns that they're only regionally launched in LA. And they ran a couple influencer marketing campaigns with the big influencers, got a ton of awareness. I think it ended up like hundreds of thousands of views for sure, ended up producing about 15,000 clicks. Out of that, they had like 1,500 people sign up for the actual thing. And then from that had no conversions, like no sales altogether. And then the people who had signed up, like only a fraction of them were actually from LA. So like even that information then for like a direct email campaign is only so valuable if you can only ship to somebody in LA. So like you got to know what it is you're trying to do and then kind of tackle that as your main objective. Like how are you going to get there? And like maybe a further point would be like who I think would be appropriate for different ones, but I also do want to know your answer for this.
There's a couple of things that I want to bring up just based off what you said. In terms of that example you gave where like they got really like people kind of fell off to the funnel to the point where it was conversions and no one did.
Yeah.
When it comes to my podcast, when I launched this, I was like, this is going to be so easy. I'm going to have influencers on my podcast. They have tens of thousands of followers. They're going to promote it. People are going to see it. They're going to come listen.
It's going to be like a numbers effect.
Yeah. I'm going to have so many downloads in no time. I was doing the math today just out of curiosity when I was walking to work. I average less than, like the total downloads for an episode on average is less than 0.01% of that person's following.
Wow.
Like it's crazy how little people come over. I don't know if that's just podcast isn't like quite a mainstream medium yet.
Doesn't it speak to just like how much people are consuming though in some ways and just like how much content is out there and something really needs to grab your attention. And even if you follow somebody, it doesn't always mean they're going to make you take action.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, and then also usually it's driving them off platform if they're on Instagram,
True.
like swiping up, like
Big
there's a bunch of
things for
different things.
podcasts.
But I was just shocked at how little, like especially in the beginning when I was interviewing these people and I was getting like not many downloads at all. And I was like, why, what's going on here?
This is an easy question for you because like I know you're not discouraged. Like you continue to like push along with this podcast, and I get that you see this as a bit of like a long-term thing, which you really have to view the podcast in. Kudos to you as well. I know you're a very busy guy with some of the social stuff that you do on a day-to-day basis. So like mixing this in there and keeping a really steady diet of it, like week to week, it's also super impressive because it's a lot of work that you handle all on your own. But just like thinking about that, you can still be really happy. What could easily be a bit demotivational or like discouraging for you, just to like kind of think about that of initially, this is what I figured, and it's like still been this kind of hard grudge to like get there over time. But like you're doing this, you know what I mean? Like you've expanded your network, you've been to places like New York, you like met people that you didn't even know before, like that trip. I'm pretty sure you recorded like 11 episodes. And you were with Hayden there. So like a lot of the things that this has done for you just over the course of time, it's just like invaluable. And at least you can think about all the time that you have spent putting into this, even if it hasn't produced all the results that you've wanted up until now, that it still has the potential to do that down the line. And it's not like you've been drinking beer.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? They're like getting like drunk every Saturday or Friday night. Like if you were to just think about like the cost that you could sink into something like that over time and how quickly it's like years go by and you're like, shit, like what have I done with my time? So kudos to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but just into that effect, like even though it's not getting a ton of downloads, like it's not the end of the world. Like you said, the connections is like probably equally as important as trying to get downloads.
And the conversations that you have too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like and like in terms of like wanting to do it and like it being a grind and like not getting as many downloads. Like I remember Canada Day just the other day. I remember being out all day and I just like looked at my girlfriend and I was like, is it bad that all I've been thinking about all day is just going home and editing a podcast? Like I just like I know I have 2 episodes I recorded like the last couple of days and I just want to start going through them.
That's badass.
It's cool. And like, and I'm lucky enough now, like you talk about, like I have such a busy schedule with my work and stuff. I have gotten it down to a workflow where I can edit the episode, the video, the social content, the YouTube clips, the thumbnails, everything in under 4 hours.
Oh.
So like I have a workflow now that works well for me. I've stopped subtitling clips and that's helped me.
That's smart.
Like,
that's incredibly long to subtitle.
Yeah. So like I've cut different things out, trying to find a process that works well for me, that I can do things relatively quickly with my busy schedule. If I have a night off, I can come home and I can bang out an entire podcast edit and have all the content done in a night, which is huge.
Yeah, true.
Whereas like, and that's just over time doing this. I'm closing in on doing it for about a year now. And like, I remember that first episode I recorded with Hayden, the audio took me 10 hours. The video took me 15 hours. The content took me another like 8 hours. Like there's so much work that used to go into one of these episodes.
Wow.
And now it's just like over time, it's just practicing.
It's a well-oiled machine now.
Yeah. But back to the conversation about influencer marketing and how it should be used. I was listening to podcasts that Nick Sharma was on recently, actually, and he made a very good point. Like, I think, in the grand scheme of things, I think influencer marketing is best used for awareness more so than conversions. Yeah. Just kind of based off what I've learned. And how Nick was positioning was they did a thing. They worked with Sarah Dietschy, and she like produced a video and like made the video for his water company, whatever it's called there that he worked for.
Hint Water,
and they worked with Sarah Dietschy. And they took her video, which one, when you're paying this influencer, maybe they're not getting conversions, but they're also creating media for you. And the and the awareness, coupled with the fact that they took her video and they ran it as an advertisement. And so they take this influencer video and they ran it as advertisements, like a pre-roll on YouTube. And if they're running it to Sarah Dietschy followers, it's almost like not a shock. And like the way they explained it was, it doesn't feel like an advertisement because it's content in a style that you're used to from someone you're familiar with.
That's interesting.
That was really interesting to me because I was just the way they explained it was him and David Perel. I don't know if you follow him.
I've heard of him before.
Yeah, and they were talking about how like by using the influencer to create the content and then market back to their followers, it's a way of like kind of not coming across as an advertisement but getting your product out there. Yeah, that's a great creative strategy, or like kind of a little loophole strategy. I'm going to like kind of plug Trufan, but it's really just because like I think it's a really practical way of adding to influencer engagements. Like on an awareness level, we plug some brands with like the key audiences or the highly engaged audiences for the particular influencers that they're doing an engagement with. And as a way of giving them some actionable data that they can go out there if they have the community management presence and capitalize on at the right time, like messaging with some sort of personalized offering or just a personal message, those people as a way of saying like, hey, you know, we did X and X campaign, like I'm not sure if you noticed, maybe even sending the link, maybe it's just an offer to like the campaign or co-brand product that they're doing together, but just like ways of capitalizing on that awareness to actually drive conversion at the same time. Like I think that's extremely valuable. And then like speaking to like awareness being probably one of the better objectives to have if you're doing an influencer campaign, I totally agree. Somebody like
Kim Kardashian, I suppose, could like produce a crazy amount of sales for a lot of brands out there, and she's blown up brands before, but like those are a dime in a dozen. Like there's some people who just have that serious influence over people's behavior out there in the world, but like few and far between. I think who does have serious influence on somebody's behavior is like somebody like you and me. A lot of people like know you around the Ottawa area and like have probably got to know you on some level personally, if they follow you from here in Ottawa, because maybe they've met you before. And so if you were to recommend something, I'd probably be a little bit more geared to try that, or potentially purchase something like it was like a pair of pants, especially if you had some sort of promo code that then you're offering me, or if it's some sort of new product that you're recommending that's good. Like there's a bit more of a trust factor there. So I think like that really like hyper local level of influencer or nano influencer, like however you want to term them, like those are going to be used more and more and more throughout time, and like certain products are probably going to be made to cater towards brands being able to use those audience on a more scalable level. And like I guess our product does that in some way too, because like we can really just tell you like who's already out there talking about you, engaging with your stuff, and probably advocating for you at the same time. And you see like ambassador programs and stuff like that. Like brands definitely are taking notice, and community-based events of ways of drawing like influencers, customers, and people like that together as a way to create some really unique like story content or a range of clips and assets that you could share across social channels. Like there's a lot of creative ways to do it, and I don't think conversion, or links, like link clicks and stuff like that is out of the question. I just think it's like, it's silly to think it's kind of a one strategy fit all type thing. And a lot of brands, give them credit too, are starting to take like a really tiered approach, understanding the need for like a couple of awareness influencers, some like mid-level micro influencers that are between like 20 to 100K maybe, regionally dispersing those, and then even going like a layer deeper too, and taking like some really like hyper local kind of style influencers that maybe have 1,000 to 5,000 or even less in some cases followers. Yeah, that's kind of my whole 2 cents on it. I think it's important.
Yeah, I agree. I think just like the example that jumps to my mind is Consumed by Carlo. I don't know if you follow him.
No.
Local from Ottawa, and his influence within the city is crazy when it comes to restaurants and stuff that he's going to. Whenever he runs a contest, so he's just shy of 10,000 followers. He just ran a contest, 2,400 comments.
Wow.
Like his engagement
for like a local restaurant giveaway or something? Or?
Yeah, I think it was like a Cinnaholic. I think it's a chain, impressive. But it was the local chain that reached out to him. So it's like if you're able to find those micro influencers within a city that have reached citywide, like that becomes really valuable, more so than someone's gonna blow it up nationally.
Yeah, that's huge.
But the next point that I wanted to bring up was organic versus paid. Where like you kind of land on that, like what should the strategy be? Should you focus more on organic? Should you focus more on paid? Like it's a tough one. Like,
it's a pretty tough balance. Yeah. I don't like. I'm not gonna sit here and advise somebody on their integrated marketing strategies and like using different channels appropriately. I'm not an expert for something like that. I'd like to just like say there's probably one better way to go about this, but it definitely depends on who you have. Like there's guys out there who are marketing their services as like some sort of agency founder. It's like traveling the world and making like tens of thousands of dollars a month just doing ads or whatever. And it's just like, come on, like it can't be that easy. I mean, like we both know a guy Hayden who's like, if you have a guy like that, like rest assured you should be putting money into ads, because they're making sure to find what's working and then like really going heavy on the ad sets that are working. And over time you're going to earn a lot of money that way, like no matter what your product or service is, if you can really hone in on where you can spend a finite amount of your budget and see the most results from that. So if that's the case and you have somebody like that, like a Hayden, then yeah, I would say like, a certain amount of your budget, or if you have somebody brilliant in-house. But I think it's really important to keep in mind the importance of organic. And then like there's some cases where I've seen some stuff recently that it makes me not so sure about, like Instagram promotions, for one example. Like Facebook ads will long live king, and I think like Facebook, we're talking about that platform, it's paid over organic every single day of the week. At one point, their platform literally just stopped giving any organic traffic. There was literally like a full-on stop, right? So the paid side of that is always going to like live and breathe, and certain brands are probably going to push smaller brands out of the market over the next 10 years as even the costs start to rise. Then you look at stuff like Instagram and that promotion.
I've heard stories and like even just seen in some cases people that I've been keeping an eye on where I started to notice they may have been promoting their account more, that it hasn't been growing. And I've also heard one or two stats like kind of dropping, and I'm not saying anything official here, but like things that I've definitely seen from across some credible sources is after you do promotions for the first time, like, well, one, for sure, you're not going to get as many views on organic posts or just general engagements, most likely, because you've paid. So now Instagram knows that like there's just like a piece of your interest that is on the paid side of things, and they're going to want to like entice you to pay to get those vanity metrics back. But even more so, the increase in fake followers as a result of promotions. And so that makes me wonder if it's like it can take a lot more time to do it organically on Instagram. And I know like personal brand wise, you've done it extremely organically from the looks of things on Instagram, which I credit to you, because like it can get easy to want to just like blast it to thousands of people. But I think it like something will always hold true to the followers that you're gaining on a more organic level over time, especially with the approach you've taken with the podcast and the networking. And I think that's always going to be a bit more powerful than paid.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that I have noticed that with Instagram is that like the ad platform isn't as powerful as Facebook's. And I think that like, but I think Instagram's trying to make it so it has the same. But like I think there's like from what I've noticed, like organic reach is going down. And I've noticed that notched on my personal profile like around. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they move forward with the Instagram ad platform. But with that in mind, like if Instagram continues to have like not the greatest ad product, and then organic reach is going down, do you think it's here to stay? Like, do you think Instagram's going anywhere in the next 3 years?
It's a big question. I don't think it'll go anywhere over the next 3 years. Like working in the space that I do, I see that that's pretty much the focal point for everybody's social strategy. So for it to go away in 3 years would mean some pretty significant changes internally for some large brands that have definitely carved out, little pockets of their internal teams dedicated towards this. Like Gary Vee owns like businesses dedicated towards mainly Instagram related content. And it's important to note, just on the other point of like paid or organic, LinkedIn for your personal brand, organic. You can't really do paid personally, I don't think yet. And then the opposite, like it's pretty expensive to do the paid stuff for companies, but you also really don't get that much out of organic reach for companies on LinkedIn. So could be worth exploring, what works and what doesn't, especially if you're looking to drive business out of the platform. But back to the note of Instagram. I mean, it's kind of tough to say where the future of that platform is heading. I think they're in good hands with Facebook. Like I was at dinner with a guy who worked with Mark Zuckerberg for like 9 years, not directly, but he was at Facebook for 9 years, and he had nothing but like amazing things to say about Mark and his kind of internal resilience when things maybe seemingly are going astray for Facebook, especially in the media, and him kind of addressing those types of things internally with a really like empowering and like strong belief in what he's doing, and like not getting distracted by those types of things. So you got to think that they're doing everything they can to like maybe remedy some like the fake issues that they've had, like headlines leading up over the last several months. And then like you said as well, maybe how it's not quite up to par with the Facebook ad platform, but continuing to build on what they already know and doing that for Instagram, like can't be far off. And then they have like giants, like I'd be curious to see, in 3 years from now, like if there's any sort of way WhatsApp has like integrated with Instagram and like the power maybe that could bring. Internally, we think about how much brands really want to contact their top fans to scale, and being able to like do that in a bit more of an automated fashion. And still to this day, like Instagram not wanting people to build bots. So essentially the only tools that exist out there to bulk message are bots, and like they're kind of illegal. So then like thinking about using that, if you're a brand and you see like a major value behind it, you don't also want to risk the presence that you've invested in up until that point. So you're not going to do that. But like, man, we'd love to work towards striving and achieving like some sort of scalable messaging solution for some of the top fans on Instagram, because I think that would make the platform so much more powerful for like the users on an influencer basis and the brands, which they obviously want to multiply the value of their social efforts. Like you're a guy who is immersed in the social space for sports brands, and it's like sometimes maybe you don't always feel like a brand as though you're getting as much out of those social channels as you seem to be putting into them from like a resource side.
Yeah, I think you guys are bang on there though with the direct messaging aspect. I think that's the future. I know like WhatsApp is starting to do like WhatsApp, like I don't know if you follow Steve Bartlett.
No. Well, like, sort of, yeah. From
Like,
Social Chain. But yeah.
I signed up to his WhatsApp thing. I haven't really followed it, but like I'll just get like messages from Steve Bartlett all the time. It's like a mass thing, like a pair, basically like his Instagram copy in a video in my WhatsApp. So it's like the direct. It's interesting. I don't know how he's done it.
I don't know how he's done it.
But it's interesting. And like Facebook bots, it's crazy. Like
the red rates,
% open rates.
I know. I was just about to ask you, like, have you thought about doing something like that for the podcast?
Maybe. I mean, like, I haven't really invested much time with the podcast on Facebook.
Yeah. I think even more just an opt-in, though.
Oh, true.
Because, like, that's what that Growth Experts podcast that I talked about earlier, like, every time an episode come out, like, getting, like, that message, you're going to want to tap on that message. And then, like, it's kind of up to you on whether or not you click the direct link to, like, Apple Music.
That's true.
Apple Podcasts, I guess.
Yeah. But speaking of, like, kind of no transition to the next point, but what about Snapchat? Are you guys, like, whether it be Trufan or person, like, where do you land on with that platform?
That's a good question. I am not really much of an expert on Snapchat. It's one of the areas that, like, even growing up when it was a bit more popular, later half of growing up, like, I wasn't, like, a child by any means, but I never used it. I never really got into it. I used it maybe for, like, a period of time when it had already kind of passed its peak in momentum. And there's something to be said, though, about, like, some people believing that they've sort of set the trends in the social space, like with like stories, obviously, now that they're the predominant aspect of Instagram, and a lot of the things that they seem to do seem to get like emulated a short period of time later on different platforms that maybe have a little bit more popularity now. So it's tough to say that like they're going anywhere, but like, you know, when you receive that negative publicity that they got from like was it Kim Kardashian or Khloe?
Kendall Jenner, I think.
Or Kendall Jenner, yeah, like who uses Snapchat, and it's hard to like recover from that as a social media network. So I don't know. It's weird though. There's like a number of people who would probably have a really good opinion about it, know a little bit more about it, and like I know even brands or companies that still really deploy it as a core part of the social strategy. So
yeah, and I used to think like Snapchat was like the premier spot to get like the 13 to 17 demo. But I've started to notice that like that's even shifting now, and like TikTok is like the spot.
Yeah.
Like
for
I have
younger demographics and stuff. Yeah.
I don't know if you've played around on TikTok at all.
Very briefly, but like those video-based platforms where they have short and like really kind of catchy or like interface videos. I mean, I tried to stay away from those because I can start wasting my time in a pretty big hurry. Have you?
Not really. Like I poked around like Brandon, like you said, for my podcast.
Yeah.
It was like he was on TikTok and he recommended it. Like,
yeah.
I haven't gotten on it yet, but all it basically is it's like a new version of Vine. Basically kind of how I look at it, like it's the younger stars. Like when I was looking for podcast guests now, like what I'll do is I'll just go to random cities and like look up the location, try and find like big influencers in other cities that I probably won't travel to do remote recordings. And I just stumbled, I think it was like Portland or Seattle or something. And there was like this one kid I clicked on and he was like a TikTok star. And I, like, he only had almost 1 million followers on Instagram. Like, who's this like 16-year-old kid? And I click on his TikTok and he's like 2.6 million. And he's on some like TikTok tour with like a group of like probably like 8 teenage guys, and they all have like 2 to 5 million TikTok followers and like hundreds of thousands to millions of followers on Instagram. I'm like, this is crazy, and it's all just like a younger demo.
It's pretty wild, and you know, like with the demographic that you talked about, like how quickly that will transition into a demographic of viewers that have, you know, disposable income and are kind of making more irrational purchases a lot of the time, like between those ages of whether like between like kind of 17 to 22, you put there, like when you're in college and stuff like that, like you're definitely not thinking long into the future about how you're going to start setting yourself up with like, you know, putting money into ETFs or stuff like that. But it's going to start to shift the purchasing behavior, and like I'm sure a lot of brands are already paying attention to TikTok, no doubt. But more and more they will start to, and I think in some markets, I know I was talking with an agency who does a lot of influencer marketing stuff in Japan, and there's like regulations that prevent them from even doing influencer engagements right now with TikTok users. So time will tell before those start to become more prevalent influencer marketing initiatives, or like a place a channel for those types of campaigns. I don't know if you can really trust the viewership of that right now to really, if you're looking for conversion, turn into conversion. Awareness though, can't argue.
Definitely. And usually before I wind on every episode, I have like the same standard group of like preset questions. Before we get to that, is there any other like things in the social space you want to talk about or anything that's kind of caught your eye?
I mean, you made me think about esports a little bit, just with talking about TikTok and obviously Twitch being a kind of a social platform in a lot of ways. We're potentially looking at integration with Twitch somewhere down the line, but something pretty fascinating like that's just going on there. And being at that Canada Sports Analytics Conference, like a few guys were kind of touching on how serious it's starting to get in that space with like, you know, collegiate type of stuff and like the developmental side of all those leagues, and how much social kind of plays a key component in there of being able to basically go about your living online. And so immediately then being able to attract from like a channel like Twitch followers on social channels that then start to earn you tons of endorsement dollars from brands, and then the natural like affinity with sports fans as well. So how sports, like maybe more traditional sports, football, you know, American football, soccer, hockey, are going to start to like have to piggyback a little bit on that market to make sure that they're capitalizing on the fan base, which is looking towards those sports. So I'd be curious to just like what your thoughts on there real quick. And yeah, I just think it's such a powerful market. Like the valuations for company in that industry right now are crazy. And the brand partnership potential that each of those like individual gamers and then the teams themselves possess is like, it's insane to me to think about how valuable those guys are right now. Like they're just like kind of flocking off $50,000 offers to play like 20-minute Fortnite game with some kid. It's insane.
Oh, it's crazy. And like I'm trying to get somebody in the esports space on my podcast now. Like I just think that'd be an interesting person. I have like kind of like a warm lead, like a buddy knows a guy in Ottawa that's really kind of popping off in esports, and he's founded his own team and stuff. So like working towards trying to get somebody to try and get some more insight on esports, because it's definitely something that's caught my eye. And like you talked about like sports having to piggyback off of it. I watched the entire NBA 2K League draft last year, and that's something I've kind of loosely been following a little bit. I don't know if you're familiar with it too much. Yeah. Like it's just, I think that's a pretty natural progression as to how sports is gonna move towards that space. Is like it was fascinating. Dedicated, like a league for 2K, but in like conjunction with the league, like with the actual league.
Yeah,
that was interesting,
dude. I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
You're 100% right. And like on the note of NBA 2K League, I heard the stat at one point that like the average salary there was more than the average salary for like the WNBA, and just kind of thinking about like how long WNBA has been in existence. And that's a really sad fact. Yeah, honestly, like the gender pay gap there and between the NBA and the WNBA is just dramatically large, far more than it really should be, in my opinion. You see sports like surfing, like they have an equal pay system for both men and women on tour, even though the tours may not be the same size. But just like it's crazy. There's obviously a ton of money and a ton of interest, and there no doubt will be potential for generations to come, because video games is like kind of still in its early stage with blockchain now almost like coming around, and will probably at some point reinvent like a lot of the way that we see video games now. But just unbelievable to see the markets out there.
It's crazy. But like another thing, like just with the within the conversation of Twitch and sports, like this is a conversation Hayden and I had when we were actually in New York. It was one of his ideas, and I brought it up on the last podcast or a couple podcasts ago that I recorded. This guy named Max Brown, is like using Twitch as like a commentating platform.
Yeah.
So like if you're all watching like the NBA finals, you're at home and like they have it on mute or whatever, and you're commentating the game or like giving your own insight and analysis live on Twitch in real time. Like that's another interesting way that like that was kind of an idea that Hayden put me on to.
Yeah.
And like at the time I was like, I don't know, but now I'm like all in on that idea that is like probably where things are going to go. And this guy that I was talking to, former QB at USC, now he works for Vayner, but he's trying to get into broadcasting. He's like, that's kind of a part of his strategy that he's planning to implement the new football season. Like I think that's where we could see Twitch and sports start to merge, like almost the traditional side of sports into Twitch.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless, and that's such a unique way of being able to build a personal brand too. It's like, imagine if you just wanted to be a commentator. Like you could actually try and create some sort of audience for yourself, like at a very young age.
Yeah.
If you're willing to just go out there and kind of get a little bit creative with content and how you can set that up. It's pretty simple now with a lot of recording and streaming types of services, but crazy. And I'll have to connect you with a couple people in the esports space, because I think I know one or two people who might be good for this type of thing.
That'd be awesome. I'd be so down.
Yeah.
But I've been doing this for a while. It's probably like one of my top 3 longest episodes ever. So we'll start to kind of wind this down.
Oh shit, yeah.
I appreciate, that's like, I love the long episodes. I always feel bad for the guest that sits here and has to listen to me talk for
No, I have nothing else to do tonight, man. I'm just in Ottawa, so.
Just in Ottawa.
Yeah, it's just like.
But so for the last couple standard questions I ask, unless there's anything else in the social space.
No, let's go on to the last few.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So like you're going to dinner, you can take 3 people. This is a pretty common question. Going to dinner, 3 people, it can be anybody, any point in time, dead or alive. Who would you take to dinner?
Wow. What a question. I like to think that I've been able to hone in on this mindset that like everybody's just a human being, and that's kind of led me to like some successes that I've had now. But those 3 people would probably be 3 people that I'd have a hard time like sitting down with and not like jittering when I start to talk. LeBron James would probably have to be up there as one of those people that I'd want to sit down with. Pretty much like the people that he's the one who we grew up watching as kind of like an icon. It could be heavily sports related. Like I could almost just throw out maybe like Tiger Woods and somebody else, but I think like LeBron James for the sports space, let's say. I'd have to say, I guess maybe Elon Musk for the tech space. Could have thrown a few in there, like Mark. There's like a few people that people think are aliens, and then there's also Bill Gates, who I'd want to talk to because of the foundation aspect that they've committed to. But Elon, because he's for sure the alien out of the bunch. And if I had to pick one more, oh man, this is a tough thing, but I'm trying to kind of cover a few areas of interest that I'm thinking about. Peyton Manning would probably be pretty interesting to me. Yeah, might have to go with Peyton too, just because I'm a longtime Colts fan. And he's kind of been all over the place in broadcasting and a few areas like that, like making some really cool content. So would love to sit down with those 3.
I also happen to be a Colts fan, so I'm super stoked with that last answer.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah. It's like, I can want to have a conversation with Peyton. He seems like such an approachable guy, too. Like somebody could just sit around you and put his like 6'5" arm around you and just have like some classic conversations about his stories.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's the best advice that you've ever gotten?
Some advice that I got through some podcasts, and I've really got to trace back just so I know who it really stems from, or check online. Google would probably be a good resource for it, but I've been sharing it a lot with people, and I think it's about this natural way of thought where we perceive hard work to then at some point equal success, and then through success you'll find that equals happiness. So it's like kind of hard work equals success equals happiness, when in reality, from my experiences now, and like it's definitely something that is a core part of my beliefs, it's in reverse. So if you feel happy, and happy is in large part due to like trying to live a life of fulfillment and kind of even self-love in some respects, but like happiness, so just being happy with what you're doing and like where you are, is going to lead you to feeling successful. So you're naturally going to feel fulfilled, successful, right? And that's going to lead to hard work. So I think like rather than kind of putting yourself in a state where you may have to think like, oh man, I just got to like keep working. Gary Vee talking about like people stuck in jobs that they don't like. Like I wouldn't just say go out and quit it, but like consider yourself like, if you're not happy, like at what point is that hard work going to make you feel successful, right? Go find something that makes you happy. You're just going to feel so much more successful waking up in the morning. And as a result, you're going to work much harder than you would otherwise. So like that by far is just such a good piece of advice I'd like to share.
That's awesome. What motivates you to get out of bed every morning?
Just continue right now, a Trufan, just continue doing like what we're doing, and continue trying to push the idea along, continue trying to work. And I think that's the short-term motivation for me, is just small wins on that front. In the long term, because I think it's kind of important to differentiate the two, and having that long-term motivator, it's definitely like travel, seeing some of the new places like I've already luckily been able to experience in life. But yeah, just kind of having a bit more freedom definitely not like fame or anything like that. It's not really part of building a personal brand to me either, as I've kind of learned now. But the freedom and just that ability to like travel some of the world, see new places, continue to meet new people, and really just kind of explore life on a pace that I can control.
What's one thing about you people wouldn't expect?
I've never broke a bone, but I've probably had stitches like 10 times.
Yeah.
Always used to like come back in from the odd bike ride. Like it was like 1 in 10 bike rides, and I'd be off to like the urgent care clinic to get my shin fixed up. So that would probably be it. Like on that note, not something I share very often, but just like surf, skate, extreme sports growing up. Man, I love those types of sports. And like I'm still enthralled with surfing to this day since the moment when I started to learn about it in Australia. So like I follow some sports that other people probably don't, especially from these parts. But like the WSL, they stream every one of their broadcasts of live events on their website. It's a pretty interesting sport. So I've kind of gotten really into that, and I still like to skateboard and kind of do those quonky sports until this day.
That's awesome. Now, this next question, you kind of answered it with the best advice, but what's one thing that's so important everybody needs to know?
Yeah, I would probably go with that same point that I made, but like I think self-love, I made this point on another podcast. A friend of mine kind of made it, and it's, I think, can come from a Tony Robbins podcast or even his sessions, like those conferences that he does. But self-love being such a critical factor to living a life of fulfillment in life. And like, I think a lot of people can get quick to judge others for confidence and an ability of like feeling very okay with where they are in life, but like where that kind of maybe can show as a little bit of arrogance. But you should never kind of question somebody about that unless it's like very clear that they're searching for external validations, because I think if you're really okay with who you are as a person, it's going to be much easier to kind of like live a life co-independently with somebody else, and ultimately just like kind of go about life the way that you see most fit for yourself, because otherwise you're always just secretly searching for some sort of love or like validation from somebody else, right? And like, although that can be fulfilling, like you should be really the only person who's concerned about whether or not you're being successful.
I like that. For the final question, I like to flip the script a little bit. What's one question that you'd like to know the answer to about anything?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'd almost just like to know, and you can probably piece some of this stuff together, but like what some of those early dynamics were like between Steve Jobs, I don't know, like Elon, Mark, and just like, Bill, all these people, like early in those, X.com days when like X.com merged with like PayPal at one point, and then like PayPal was bought by eBay. Like I just want to be in like a room with some of those like influential minds and hear what those conversations were like in Silicon Valley, which would have been really like 15 to 20 years ago or something, even less, maybe in some cases. That kind of just blows my mind every time I learn something more about those types of people. And I love listening to like startup stories or how I built this and stuff like that. You never feel like you've missed any information. You always feel like you're walking away with just like this wealth of information that you can try and apply. So I don't know what the exact topic is that I'd want to know, but I'd want to be a fly on the wall with like a lot of those guys talking in some sort of room.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast.
Oh, man. My pleasure, Jacob. Yeah, I appreciate you having me, and like, it's been nice getting to know you over the last little year and a half.
Yeah, definitely, man. I want to give you the floor. Plug everything and anything you got right now. Where can the people find you? Where can the people find Trufan? Everything.
Appreciate it. So find me at Scott Berty on Instagram. So it's Scott_Berty. That's the same thing on Twitter, and pretty much the same thing on LinkedIn. At the end of the day, it's just like my first and last name. You can just type that in, Berty. And then for Trufan, at Trufan.io on Instagram. And that's the same thing as our website, Trufan.io. So yeah, reach out either over our contact page if you're interested in Trufan, or always send me a DM on Instagram or on LinkedIn if you're interested in chatting or networking or meeting together, if you're in Toronto or somewhere else.
Awesome, man. I want to thank you once again for coming on the podcast. And I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. Whether you've listened the entire way through, you've only listened to bits and pieces, I really appreciate you taking time to check this out. Guys, do me a favor, go and follow Scott, go and check out Trufan. I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below. And if you'd like to follow me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at @thejacobkelly. Feel free to come and say hello whenever you'd like. And if you'd like to follow the podcast, you can find it on Instagram at @mysocialpod and on YouTube by searching up My Social Life. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.